Hi guys, as we know, the Conservatives like to spread misinformation, and sometimes their lies are so reckless that it'd have your head spin. Now, Matt Vickers, the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, appeared on the Concrete Farmer show where he was talking about immigration and in particular asylum hotels. But unfortunately, he received zero pushback, so I have to step in and do his job. Have a listen to this.
Kemi Badenoch's in the papers this morning saying that she would support housing migrants in camps rather than in hotels or rented accommodation. Put a bit of meat on the bones of that, please. What camps would she put them in?
I think she's willing to look at everything. I mean, before the election, you saw what was happening with disused army bases. We were looking at whether we could put people... Well, we were putting people in there, and we're looking at how much further you could go. This is not an option. This is not an option. Rocking up to hotels, putting hundreds and hundreds of migrants in, making communities fear.
Okay, this is insane. When the Conservatives were in charge, 400 hotels were in use. Now, since the Conservatives left office, now some of it is due to the Conservative policies, but most of it is due to the new government's policy. It's down to about 200. Now, it's not zero, but it's less than when the Conservatives were in charge. So this guy is saying, how dare you put asylum seekers in hotels? How dare you put migrants in hotels? When you had 400 hotels in use, and now the number is half. What he's trying to do, and this is the problem with the media, there's no pushback from the media. Of course, there's no pushback on Talk TV. What he's trying to do is sell the idea that this isn't a new problem. This happened when the Labour Party were in charge, not when the Conservatives were in charge. Once again, when the Conservatives were in charge, there were 400 hotels in use. Now it's about 200. It's not zero, but it's half. But he's trying to convince people it's a new problem. It's something that happened over the last number of months or weeks.
For their welfare, fear for their women and children. And also on top of that, you've got this situation where there is a huge cost. We need to reduce the cost. We need to reduce the upheaval in community.
Okay, I'll have no hair left. Don't have very much anyway. The cost. The Conservatives decided not to process the claims. They allowed hotels to fill up. They moved people into hotels, they moved people into army barracks, into camps or whatever. Not camps, but army barracks, disused army barracks, other places. Because they refused to process the claims. Robert Jenrick, and I'm 99% it was Robert Jenrick that said this, he said it would create a pull factor if we process the claims. If you process people's claims, then you can move them into normal accommodation or you can deport them. But the Conservatives decided, no, we're not actually going to process the claims. We're not going to process sufficient numbers of claims. And now they're complaining about the cost. Like, if you don't process people's claims and they have to sit in limbo for years, that's a cost.
They went to Altrincham, where they put nearly 300 migrants in a hotel in the centre of town, right near a school. Not only is there the fear factor of what goes on there and the fact that there's huge groups of lone men with nothing to do hanging around town centres, but the economic impact is unreal. I was speaking to people who owned pubs, who owned restaurants, who owned pubs. Usually there was 300 people rocking up every weekend to spend money.
No. That's not the case. Just think about it for a moment. If a hotel was successful, why would it do a deal with the Home Office to fill the hotel with asylum seekers? Obviously, we're talking about hotels who are not successful, or they're not doing very well, or they're having problems. But there's a cost of living crisis. There's an issue with people spending money in hotels, people going on holiday, people are cutting back. So obviously, hospitality is struggling. Hospitality is suffering. So if you're running a hotel and you're seeing the number of people coming to this hotel decline over the last number of years, and the Home Office says, hey, look, I'll do a deal with you, give us use of your hotel and we'll fill it with asylum seekers and we'll pay you a fixed rate every month or whatever, then you're going to jump at the chance. This is not... He's trying to sell this idea that hotels have been strong-armed into filling them with asylum seekers. No, they're being offered a contract, and obviously this contract is better than paying customers. If they were doing really well with paying customers, then they wouldn't accept these contracts. Like, this is supposed to be the party of business.
Now it's just full of migrants hanging around the streets, and those businesses that people have put their lives into creating, they've worked incredibly hard to create employment opportunities, to deliver that economic growth. they're just being absolutely trashed. Their dreams and all their hard work that they put into these businesses are trashed because the ecosystem of business in those towns is completely...
This is the party of Brexit, talking about businesses struggling. Didn't care about businesses when you were implementing Brexit. Were you, Matt? No.
Destroyed by this situation.
But there's no answer for it, is there? Because, you can put them in camps, or you can put them in, HMOs, and you can move them into rented accommodation and all of that. The blight, though, is going to be the same. The effect is going to be the same. People are going to be unhappy until these guys are kicked out of the country. And I'm not sure any politician has got the cojones to do that.
Well, we need to remove all of the reasons that are pulling these. All of the pull factors need to be removed. We need to remove the swanky hotels. They're
not swanky hotels. They cease to be hotels when asylum seekers are put in them. Like, why would somebody, if you're running a business, and the new customer just wants the basics, why would you add extra? Once again, this is supposed to be the party of business. And they are trying to sell the idea that hotels who are taking in asylum seekers, and we're talking about significant numbers, so they're probably, I've seen pictures of maybe 3-4 people per room. Why would the hotel add extra services if it's not necessary? That would be a waste of money. That would eat into their profit margin. Once again, the party of business.
We need to be looking at what Kemi said. Look at those camps, look at those other options, A, to reduce the burden on the taxpayer, but B, to make it less attractive.
See, the question has to be asked, okay, the Conservatives want to build camps, concentrate asylum seekers in these camps. Where are these camps going to go? How are you going to fund this? Because you need to provide security, you need to provide facilities. So, when you have a hotel or an ex-hotel, you already have a structure. There are already facilities, basic facilities. There are, sewerage. There is a place for people to eat. There is a place for people to congregate. They have a roof over their head. A hotel, while it's no longer a hotel, is still some type of accommodation that can be used. If you want to build a camp, first of all, you need to find a place for it. We've yet to hear Kemi Badenoch or the Conservatives say where these camps are going to go. We've yet to hear how many camps are going to be necessary. Because if you're going to take everyone out of hotels and put them into camps, you need pretty big camps. And then you need all the facilities that go with that. And who's going to provide those facilities? Because that's a cost. You need to provide healthcare, you need to provide catering, you need to provide security, accommodation, all the equipment that goes along with that. Maybe some Conservative donor that's going to win that contract, but it's still a cost that you're going to have to explain.
The only solution is to remove people who arrive here illegally. We need to remove all of these options that they're getting through human rights acts.
They're not coming to stay in a hotel. They're fleeing persecution, or in many cases, they're coming to work, but they're not allowed to work. No question, no mention of working. Why doesn't the British government allow these people to work? I'd love that question to be asked.
Let them tie our courts up and stay here. We had it in law. If you arrived in this country, you would be detained and removed. We need to go back to that situation. In a year's time, probably, Keir Starmer will come. He'll have the reality check of going, this situation is only getting worse. And he'll probably go back to trying to create the legislation that we already had in place. But the problem is, we knew what was going to happen when this guy got into number 10. This is a guy who voted against every single effort to toughen up our immigration system.
You had an 80-seat majority at one stage. It was whittled down to about 40, but you still had a majority. You can't blame Labour for you not succeeding. You can't blame the other parties because you did not implement your measures. I've said before why the Conservatives couldn't implement certain measures, because they broke international law. Because the civil service said, we can't physically do this, we can't feasibly do this, we can't legally do this.
And this is a guy who actively campaigned against the deportation of foreign criminals. He wanted to keep them on our streets.
No, he was campaigning for human rights. Now, unfortunately, certain criminals are also humans. So if we take away human rights just for criminals, it ends up taking away human rights for everyone. So while the Conservatives would like to sell the idea that we can pick and choose human rights and pick and choose who receives them, that's not how human rights work. It's like the rule of law. The rule of law is supposed to apply to everyone. You don't say, well, let's apply to some people and not others. The same with human rights. You don't get to say, well, we're going to deny asylum seekers human rights because they don't deserve them. But don't worry, British people will be okay. These are the same people, the same individuals who are saying we need to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. Don't worry, it will only impact asylum seekers. We need to abandon the Human Rights Act. But don't worry, it won't affect British people. Well, by definition, it will. You're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and they don't care about the consequences. And unfortunately, when people like Matt Vickers goes on TV, like Talk TV, he receives zero pushback. I'm sorry this video went on for very long, but I felt the need to do this because the media is part of the problem here. They need to grill these people. They need to push back. They need to call out their lies. Because if they don't, the general public believe these things are true. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think, and I'll see you in the next video.